Hey guys, it's me, Mr. Plastic. What we're going to take a look at today is the digestive system. You guys are probably preparing for the test and you're wondering, gosh, Mr. Plastic, I hope this test is a little bit easier. And I can assure you that the digestive system is not as difficult as some of the other organ systems. So let's get started. When I take a look at the digestive system, the major function of the digestive system is to break down food, is what it's going to do. And we want to break down this food molecules that we take in into small enough pieces so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. So for instance, let's say this is a food molecule. I take it in. When I take it in, the process of digestion begins, and I take these macromolecules, it could be carbs, my proteins, and my fats, and I'm able to break them down with the help of enzymes into small enough pieces. Okay, so these are my small little Lego building blocks that I have right here. Okay, these molecules that get broken down small enough get absorbed in the bloodstream. When they get absorbed in the bloodstream, they get taken in by cells. These cells can do a variety of things with these particular small enough little molecules that we have here. Like right here might be a collection of proteins that I broke down. I turned them into these amino acids because that's the building blocks of these proteins. I can then take these amino acids taken in by the cell and I can rearrange them into something that the cell needs. Like this once was, a component of a candy bar. And now look what I turned these amino acids into. I built an enzyme. So that's kind of what's going on inside of your body. You're taking these macromolecules, you're breaking them down, they get absorbed in the bloodstream, they get taken in by cells, and your cells are able to repurpose these macromolecules into something useful for the body. You can kind of think of it as an assembly line in reverse. Your digestive system works as an assembly line in reverse. You imagine the car coming across the assembly line. With the digestive system, we're taking the car as a whole, we're breaking the car down, and then we're repurposing those parts of the car into something useful for the body is what we're actually doing. These components that don't get broken down, they come out the other end through a process called defecation. So sometimes we have indigestible material, things that don't get broken down small enough, they get absorbed. They don't get absorbed, but they come through the body and they go out through a process that's called defecation. So again, what your digestive system does is we take in food. These are the major functions of the digestive system that I'm going over now. Digestive system, we take in food. That's called ingestion. Then we break the food down. That's called digestion. We break the food down both mechanically or physically and chemically with the help of enzymes that we're going to get into. Those components that get broken down small enough get absorbed in the bloodstream. And then those components that don't get broken down small enough, they come out the other end through a process called defecation. When we look at the digestive system, it's composed of two parts. The two components of the digestive system that we have are the alimentary canal, which is a giant hollow tube that's running throughout the whole entire body. Okay? And then you have accessory digestive organs that kind of help out that hollow tube. The alimentary canal is also known as the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, but it's just this continuously hollow tube that's running through your body. It starts with the mouth, okay? Then we go into the pharynx. Then we go into the esophagus. Then we go into the stomach. Then we go into the small intestine. Then we go into the large intestine. Then this fecal matter collects into the rectum, and then it comes out the anus. So if you're part of that hollow tube, you are what's called the alimentary canal. If you're kind of like the hollow tube, and you support the hollow tube, but you're not the hollow tube, you're called an accessory digestive organ. For instance, some accessory digestive organs that we have are things like the liver. And the liver is going to produce bile, store that bile in the gallbladder, and then donate that bile or give that bile to the small intestine. The pancreas would be another accessory digestive organ. It's not part of the hollow tube, but it's helping the hollow tube out. Your salivary glands are an accessory digestive organ as well. They're not part of the hollow tube, but they're helping out the hollow tube. So you can kind of think of like these structures as being like, hey, alimentary canal, I support your cause. And I'm going to do some things for you. Here's some saliva, okay? Here's some enzymes. Here's some bile. So that's how we kind of distinguish between the alimentary canal and the accessory digestive organs. Again, here are the major components that we have of the alimentary canal. The mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine, the large intestine, your rectum, and your anus. On your test, you can expect me to ask you questions. Which of the following is not part of the alimentary canal? Those are good multiple choice types questions that I can give you on your test that you have coming up. here you can see the giant hollow tube that you have running through your body. We start with the mouth here, okay, and then we move down the pharynx, and then we move down the esophagus, and then we move into the stomach, and then from the stomach we move into the small intestine that's here, and then from the small intestine we move into, here we go, wait for it, we move into the large intestine, and then from the large intestine we move into the rectum, and then we come out of the anus. Those are all the components that we have of the alimentary canal. And you can also see here when we take a look at it, these structures here, like the liver, okay, this is the liver that's here. I'm sorry, I'm circling it in red. I should use a different color. But this is the liver, and it's going to help support that alimentary canal in some manner. This is your pancreas is hanging out underneath here. It's another accessory digestive structure that's not part of that hollow tube, but it's actually donating enzymes and substances to that hollow tube is what it's doing. Okay, so let's start with the ingestion component of it. So we take food into our mouths. Our mouths, inside of our mouth, we call that the oral cavity. Is what we're going to call that. When we look at our mouth, you have your lips on the outside. Your lips have a ton of sensory receptors on the outside, so you have a great feeling on your lips because you want to know what's going inside of your what's going inside of your mouth is what you want to know. What's going inside that oral cavity. So like if I eat something that's hot, when that touches my lips, I'm able to identify, oh, that's hot, or like, oh, I'm eating a shard of glass. I may not want to have that in the oral cavity. You have your cheeks, they form the lateral wall. And you have your hard palate and your soft palate. And then towards the back of your oral cavity, you have the uvula. So this is a diagram right here of the inside of your mouth that we're going to take a look at. Human beings have 32 teeth. What teeth are going to do is they're going to take that food through a process called mastication. Mastication is chewing. And the chewing of this particular food is going to increase the surface area of it. So when we chew food, that's a mechanical digestion that's occurring. It's called mastication, chewing food, mastication. We're increasing the surface area of that food, so now enzymes have a better chance of interacting with these macromolecules is the point of mastication. When we chew our food, our tongue is going to press it up against our hard palate. Okay, so your hard palate is towards the front of the mouth is what it's going to do. And it's going to press it also against the soft palate as well. And we're going to form a semi-solid, kind of liquidy like mass that we call a bolus. So inside of your mouth, we're forming a food mass that we're going to call a bolus. That's B-O-L-U-S. So B-O-L-U-S. We're going to form a bolus is what we're going to form. So as we masticate our food, we chew it, we're going to form a semi-solid little mass of food. It's going to be a ball-like structure that we're going to call a bolus. Now there is an enzyme inside of your mouth that's produced by the salivary glands. The enzyme that's produced by your mouth is what we call salivary amylase. And salivary amylase is going to break down your starches into disaccharides. So immediately that saliva comes in contact with starches inside your mouth, and immediately we start breaking down these carbs into simpler sugars is what we're doing. So we know this structure here is called a bolus that we have. And then what's going to happen when we swallow, the tongue is going to kick the food towards the back of the throat here. This uvula that's right here is going to get kicked back this way to prevent food from getting into your nasal cavity that's here. And now we're officially in what's called the nasopharynx. I'm not in the nasopharynx. What's in called the pharynx. Okay, so this whole tube right here is what we call the pharynx. So this tube right here is what we call the pharynx. And the pharynx is broken down into the nasopharynx, that'll label with an N here, the oropharynx, that'll label with an O here, and then the laryngopharynx, that'll label with an L here. All right, so now here's this bolus that's made its way into your pharynx. We have to know that the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx are part of your digestive system. The nasopharynx is not part of your digestive system. It's part of your respiratory system. So this bolus is going to make its way into the oropharynx, then to move its way down into the laryngopharynx is where it's going to go. Now this bolus has an option. It can go down tube A, or it can go down tube B. We want this bolus to go down tube B due to the fact that it's our esophagus. So how is it able to go down tube B? That's what I'm going to explain next. So we said that act of swallowing. When I swallow, my tongue goes back, presses that food back into my pharynx, into my oropharynx. But also when I swallow, my larynx is sitting right here. My larynx goes upward. Okay, so if you swallow, my larynx goes upward. So you can view your larynx like this, and then on the top of your larynx, you have this structure here that's called the epiglottis. Hi kids, I'm the epiglottis. So right here is your epiglottis. So when I swallow, my larynx goes up, and that presses up against this epiglottis that's right here. Okay, so when I swallow, my larynx goes up, it presses against the epiglottis. When I swallow, my larynx goes up, it presses against the epiglottis. This is going to prevent food from going into my trachea. So that's what prevents food from going into my trachea, is this little flap of cartilage that hangs out on top of the trachea that's called the epiglottis. That's basically what it does, which is why it's always good to swallow. If you don't swallow your food, you inhale it, you have a chance of that food going down into your trachea, and then you have a chance of choking, and choking is not a good thing, because we learned in class the rule of threes. You can only live without air for how long? You can only live without air for 3 minutes, and we know that you can live without water for 3 days, and you can live without food for about 3 weeks. So that's called the rule of threes, and we kind of talked about that at the beginning of this particular unit that we're dealing with. So just let me reiterate this. This right here is that epiglottis that's right here. So this is your epiglottis that's right here. And when this trachea goes upward, when you swallow, it presses against that epiglottis. And then that's going to allow this bolus then to move down into the esophagus. That's right here. This is that uvula that we talked about, this hanging on the back of your mouth. That's going to go in a backward-like fashion when you swallow, preventing food from going into your nasopharynx. Remember, the nasopharynx is not part of your digestive system. Towards the back of your mouth, you have these other structures here that are called tonsils. These tonsils are pieces of lymphatic tissue. They're going to aid in your immune response. So they help when you're fighting off foreign invaders, things like that. It's what they're doing. Sometimes these become inflamed and you have tonsillitis, and you have to get your tonsils removed. But this is just a piece. These tonsils are just pieces of lymphatic tissue that are towards the back of your mouth. And you can see this is your hard palate. When you chew that food and then your tongue presses it up against this hard palate, that's going to form a bolus. Just a quick refresher. Our mouth physiology, we have the mastication, the chewing of the food. We mix it with saliva. Saliva contains salivary amylase. Salivary amylase breaks down these starches into disaccharides. Your tongue has all these taste buds that alert you to what you're eating. Is it salty? Is it sweet? Those things are all on your tongue. Those are called your taste buds. We talked a little bit about the pharynx as well. So when you take a look at the pharynx, the pharynx is broken down to the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Remember that nasopharynx is not part of your digestive system. The oropharynx and laryngopharynx are. We also talked about the epiglottis to make sure that we route food into our esophagus. When we take a look at the esophagus is approximately a 10-inch tube that's going from your laryngopharynx through the diaphragm into your stomach. The interesting thing about your esophagus is now we begin to have this successive wave-like motion that's occurring to help push this food down to the stomach. This wave-like motion, this wave-like motion, this wave-like motion, this wave-like motion is called peristalsis. This wave-like motion is called peristalsis, and it's going to kick this food down into the stomach. The cool thing about peristalsis is peristalsis allows us to consume food in a zero-gravity environment. Like if you're going into space or something like that, you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, gravity's not here, so gravity's not going to pull food down in my stomach. No. Your body has this thing called peristalsis where you have this smooth muscle that just kind of pushes this food down into the stomach. Also allows you to eat upside down. So now food is going to enter the stomach. The stomach is located on the left side of your abdominal cavity. So right here is where my stomach's going to be located at. My stomach is sitting right here on the left side of my abdominal cavity. This is my stomach right here, and your stomach's going to sit a little bit just like this inside of your body. So your stomach kind of sits just a little bit like this, and now we're going to take a look at the stomach itself. So when I look at the stomach, okay, so this is a stomach that's right here that you can see. When I look at the stomach, this structure right here is where food's going to enter the stomach. It's called the cardioesophageal sphincter. So we have the cardioesophageal sphincter. Food leaves the stomach right here, and this structure right here, okay, this structure right here, okay, is called the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so you have the cardioesophageal sphincter that enters, and then it leaves via the pyloric sphincter, or pyloric valve is what it's going to leave. Now we have some cool anatomy of the stomach, okay. This region right here is my cardiac region of the stomach. Then you have this little curve that's up here that's called the fundus. So you have the cardiac region, you have the fundus. Now this main structure right here of my stomach is called the body. And then you have this second curve that's down here, that's coming right here, this curve that's right here. That is what we call my pyloric region, okay? So you have the cardiac region, okay? You have the cardiac region. Then you have this curve right here that's called the fundus. This main structure of my stomach right here that I have my hand around, that's called my body. And then down here I have my pyloric region. And then this is my pyloric sphincter that's down here, my pyloric sphincter. This is my cardioesophageal sphincter that's up here. Now your stomach has cool structures on the inside of it that allow it to kind of fold in on itself. We call them rugae. So it kind of has these accordion-like structures that allow the stomach to kind of fold in on itself, and they're called rugae. And then when you get a lot of food, these accordion-like structures, they can expand, okay, to take care of all that food that you are consuming. So this region, food's going to come in through the cardioesophageal sphincter. So right here is going to be this cardioesophageal sphincter. We're still dealing with the bolus, okay. The reason it's called the cardioesophageal sphincter because this region of the stomach right here is what we call our cardiac region. I'm just going to label it with a C. This is called our fundus. That's right here. So this curve right here is called our fundus. I'll label with an F. Okay. This region right here is called the body of the stomach. I'll label it with a B. Okay. So this is the body of the stomach. And then down here we have the pyloric region of our stomach that I'll label with a P. And then right here is my pyloric sphincter or my pyloric valve that's going to be sitting right in here where food is going to leave, is what's going to happen. You can see these little folds that we have in our stomach. We call them rugae. So these folds that are inside of my stomach, I call them the rugae. So there's your rugae that you have. And they kind of allow the stomach to kind of fold in on itself like an accordion. So we have this food that comes into the cardioesophageal sphincter. Cardioesophageal sphincter opens up and then dumps this food in the stomach. Stomach is a holding tank for food. So you can kind of think of the stomach as a holding tank for food. Approximately, food spends about an hour in your stomach. Your stomach has this stuff that we just call them collectively the gastric juices inside of your stomach. Now, your gastric juices contain a variety of things. What we have to understand is one of the main elements that's in these gastric juices is hydrochloric acid. So your stomach is extremely acidic. Okay, because it's acidic, we have to protect the lining of your stomach. Because if we don't protect the lining of your stomach, then what's going to happen is the stomach's going to be, the lining of it's going to get eaten away by this hydrochloric acid. So the lining of your stomach is covered by this mucus. So there's this nice mucousy lining that's kind of protecting the actual inner lining of the stomach and preventing it from getting basically eaten away at by this hydrochloric acid. What helps out in this mucus is something called a bicarbonate. So a bicarbonate kind of helps neutralize the stomach acid when it comes in contact with this particular mucus. So this is why the hydrochloric acid doesn't eat away at the inner lining of your stomach, is because this bicarbonate that's located with this mucus that's lining the stomach itself. Now, the major enzyme that's inside of the stomach is called pepsin. And pepsin gets activated by this hydrochloric acid environment that it's in. And pepsin is going to help break down your proteins. Pepsin helps break down these proteins into the amino acids. We have to also know that these gastric juices also contain a whole bunch of water is going to be in here as well, because having this food in a watery-like matrix is going to help dissolve things and stuff like that. And so water is also an amazing major component of these gastric juices. So also inside of the stomach, we still have this peristalsis that's occurring inside the stomach. And to mix up the food, the mechanical digestion is going to be something that we call churning. So churning is going to be the mechanical digestion that's going to occur inside of the stomach. And then what's going to happen is this pyloric valve is going to open up, and some of this food then is going to leak out. And the cool thing about is when some of this food leaks out, then it creates like more of a mixing of the food, because kind of waves are created when we open up that pyloric valve as well. So we have this churning that's occurring in the stomach. We have this pepsin breaking down these particular proteins. Now you have to note that your esophagus does not contain this particular mucus. So sometimes you get acid reflux, and with acid reflux, the stomach acid is going up into your esophagus and burning the actual lining or eating away at the lining of your esophagus. Why it hurts really bad. If you have an area of your stomach that's not producing large amounts of mucus like it should, you can wind up with a stomach ulcer. So that stomach ulcer is just a patch of lack of mucus production in that particular area, and then the hydrochloric acid has a way to eat away at that lining of your stomach. This is just some of the things that I just said about the stomach being a temporary storage tank for food. It's a site of protein digestion is going to occur in there with the enzyme called pepsin. When this bolus leaves the stomach, it's no longer called a bolus. It's called chyme. It kind of looks like cream of wheat. So it came in as a bolus and it leaves as chyme. So now we move on to the small intestine. The small intestine is probably the true superstar of all the digestive organs. So this is probably the single most important digestive organ that you have into your body, due to the fact that it's going to break down your foods even further. There's a lot of enzymatic activity that's occurring in here. And then we finally break down the food molecule small enough to a lot of absorption is going to occur into the small intestine. The small intestine is held in place by this membrane that we call the mesentery. So the mesentery is what's holding that small intestine in place. I believe last year the mesentery finally got an organ status. In the news, they were talking about like a new organ was discovered in a human being. I believe the mesentery was one of those. So the small intestine is going to go from the pyloric sphincter down to the ileocecal valve. The basic anatomy of the small intestine, we have the duodenum, we have the jejunum, and the ileum. So there's three sections we have. We have the duodenum, and the duodenum has a curve that's associated with it, and in this curve, the head of the pancreas is going to sit. And then we have the jejunum, and then we have the ileum is what we have. So those are the major regions of the small intestine. It's about a 13-foot long tube. So this is a 13-foot long tube that we have. And I'm going to kind of talk about this 13-foot long tube next. So in this 13-foot long tube, if this is my small intestine that I have here, okay, and this is just a generalized 13-foot long tube that I have right here, I don't want, okay, this food to just have a straight shot, okay, to go through this 13-foot long tube. Okay, I want to make this process a little bit more difficult for this food molecule to travel, this chyme to travel. So what we do inside of the small intestine is we increase the surface area to make this journey a lot longer. So when you look inside the small intestine, we have these structures that we call circular folds. So these structures that I'm drawing right now, oops, that was a horrible circular fold. But these are circular folds that we have inside of the small intestine. And these are one structures that we have to increase the surface area. So this is a circular fold, circular fold, circular fold, circular fold. You guys get the idea. And then on these circular folds, we have other little projections that we call villi. Okay, or they're called villi as well. But these are called villi that are on each one of these circular folds. So on each one of these circular folds, we have these other structures that we call villi. Again, we're going to increase the surface area of the small intestine to make this journey occur a lot longer. But you guys get the idea. These villi are located on each one of these circular folds. Then on each of these villi, you have smaller little structures that we call microvilli. So on each of these villi, we have smaller structures that are called microvilli. Okay, and you have a lot of these little microvilli that are on each and every one of these villi. So now, this food molecule has to travel up all of these peaks, and it has to travel down all of these valleys, and it has to go back up these little peaks and come in contact, increasing the surface area, thus making the journey occur a lot longer. Therefore, we can have a greater rate of absorption. This is a good diagram here showing you the circular folds, the villi, and then remember on these villi you have the microvilli, all increasing the surface area. So now this food has to travel a greater distance, thus increasing the absorption rate of the food that you're taking in. There is an irritable bowel disorder that you have that's called celiac disease, and with celiac disease, when your body has the presence of gluten, you get an immune response, and what begins to happen is your small intestines become a lot more smooth, and because of that, it takes a lot quicker and decrease the rate of absorption that's occurring inside of your small intestine because of that. And that's celiac disease. You have an immune response to gluten. Okay, so now we're going to get to the nitty-gritty, what actually occurs inside of the small intestine. So we've come from the pyloric sphincter. We're making our way into the small intestine. Immediately, when food comes into the small intestine, you have a hormone that's going to be released. Okay, the name of this hormone is this cholecystokinin. So this is this hormone right here. It's called cholecystokinin. And this cholecystokinin is kind of get the ball rolling. And then what's going to happen is the pancreas, this clues the pancreas into starting to release a lot of its enzymes. And here are the major enzymes that are going to be released by the pancreas. Okay, we have the proteolytic enzymes. They're going to help break down your proteins into amino acids. You have your pancreatic lipase that's going to help break down fats. Then you have your pancreatic amylase that's going to help break down your carbs. As well as the pancreas is also going to release this bicarbonate, again, to neutralize any stomach acid that may be coming through on that food that's being released by the pyloric sphincter. Because we want to neutralize that stomach acid, so therefore we do not eat away at the lining of our small intestines. Also at this point, your gallbladder is going to release bile. Okay, so your gallbladder releases bile. Remember, your liver is what's going to produce the bile. The bile is going to be stored in the gallbladder. Your gallbladder releases the bile. Bile is going to emulsify fat. So bile is going to emulsify fat. You think of emulsification. If I have a beaker, and I have a beaker that's full of water, and I have a beaker that has some fat and oil in it as well, okay, and I mix that water with that oil. If I mix that water with that oil is going to rise to the top, okay? So if this is my beaker that's right here, this oil is going to rise to the top of that beaker. If I add bile to it, it causes that fat to emulsify. Emulsification just allows that fat to dissipate freely in that watery-like environment. So then this pancreatic lipase can interact more with that fat molecule and break it down a lot easier. That's what the bile does. Your liver has a variety of other functions as well. Your liver is going to help detoxify alcohols, detoxify any toxins and things like that in your body. Your liver has a great role in that. Also aids in blood clotting. So your liver has a vital role in digestion because it actually produces the bile, but it has a lot of bile, but it also has a lot of other roles in your body. It's a vitally important organ when we take a look at it. We also have these things that are called brush border enzymes. So we also have these structures that are called brush border enzymes. And they're going to produce a variety of enzymes inside of your small intestine as well. And they're actually inside of your small intestine that are producing these enzymes. They're going to break down major macromolecules. All right, so just to kind of recap where we're at, major job of the small intestine is to break down those food molecules further, okay, and then we make this a greater distance to travel with those circular folds, the villi and the microvilli, and then finally we have this absorption that occurs, and then once that absorption occurs, we're kind of left with the undigestible material. But this undigestible material is still in this watery-like matrix, so we're going to move on to the large intestine now. And the basic job of the large intestine is, well, this food's been traveling this watery-like matrix. Water is a vitally important thing for the body. Helps maintain our specific heat. It helps maintain our body temperature because it has a high specific heat. Things dissolve in it relatively easily. So water has a variety of properties that are vitally important. So we want to hold on to this water. So the large intestine is going to reabsorb all of this water is what's going to happen. And we take a look at the large intestine. This is what it looks like right here. And basically food's going to come in through what's called the ileocecal valve because we're coming from the ileum, okay, from the ileum of the small intestine into this area right here that's called the cecum. Off of the cecum, you have this piece of lymphatic tissue that's known as your appendix. It's thought that the appendix is an area that houses good bacterium. We call good bacterium in the large intestine that has a name that's called probiotics. This is kind of an area where they hang out. Remember, sometimes your appendix becomes infected, becomes inflamed, and if that happens and then it were to like rupture, then you're going to spread that bacterium that's been invading the appendix everywhere and cause a variety of problems. But that's what the appendix is thought to house: good bacterium. Like after you have a bout of diarrhea, we can reculture that with the good bacterium that's being housed in the appendix. But we go from the cecum. So there's a little song. This is my cecum. This is my cecum. Ascending colon. Ascending colon. Transverse colon. Transverse colon. Descending colon. Descending colon. Sigmoid colon. Sigmoid colon. Into the rectum. Into the rectum, out the anus. Okay, so again we have the, I love that song. We have the cecum that's here. We have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon. Then this waste collects in the rectum, and then it comes out the anus. The anus has two sphincters that are associated with them. Both of them open up. And then you're able to defecate. Again, the job of the large intestine is going to be to remove this water. So we're going to reabsorb this water, and we're going to remove enough water that we still want to have a stool that looks something like this right here. So let me show you this real quick. So this is a basic stool chart that we have right here. And you want your stool to be somewhere in this range right here is where you want it to be. And some things can happen that can prevent this from happening. And a major disorder, one of the most common digestive disorders that's out there, it's this whole group of disorders that we call IBS, and that's referred to as irritable bowel syndrome. So with irritable bowel syndrome, what's basically occurring in the large intestine is that you have the speed at which it's moving. So if you have the movement occurring really fast, you're going to wind up with irritable bowel syndrome D, which is referred to as diarrhea. That means it's moving through the colon too fast. You can also have something called IBS C, which is IBS referring to constipation, in which that stool is moving too slow. It's thought that this is brought on by stress. or a traumatic event can cause your IBS symptoms to occur. The mechanical digestion that's occurring, I forgot to say this, the mechanical digestion that's occurring in the small intestine, the mechanical digestion that's occurring is called segmentation. So in the small intestine, you have something called segmentation, in which it's kind of like peristalsis, but we're able to like break that molecule up into two separate pieces. So that's some of the mechanical digestion that's occurring inside of the small intestine. You still have this wave-like motion that's going to push in the large intestine this fecal matter towards the rectum. We talked about IBS. Some other common bowel diseases that we have are ulcerative colitis. And ulcerative colitis is a chronic disease, and it affects the lining of the large intestine. And basically, it's thought that it's an autoimmune disorder in which when a certain food is present, then that food is going to kickstart your immune system to kind of start attacking the lining of your small intestine. Then you have inflammation that occurs. With that inflammation, then what begins to occur is then you have cramping, discomfort, frequently emptying of your colon. Another one that we have that's a more severe is called Crohn's disease. And Crohn's disease is a lot like colitis, except it affects the whole entire intestine wall, and it can even move up into your small intestine as well. And Crohn's disease just doesn't affect the inner lining. Same thing, thought to be food-based, can be food-based. Inflammation, a lot of times you have parts of your small intestine have to be removed and things like that. And we talked about celiac disease, in which a person can't eat gluten. It kind of smooths out the inside of the small intestine and makes this distance that they have to travel, the food have to travel a lot less. After you're done with the digestive system, then we kind of moved into taking a look at metabolism and things like that. Remember, metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions going on inside of your body. You have catabolic reactions. Catabolic reactions are the breakdown, and then the anabolic reactions are the buildup. So our metabolism is the sum of both the catabolic and the anabolic reactions. The more chemical reactions that I have going on inside my body, the higher my metabolism. We also did like a variety of calculations. I would also know things like your BMI, BMR. I would know things like your TDEE, or total daily energy expenditure. I would also know on this test that's coming up, I would also know that Choose My Plate website that we talked about when we have a food plate when we're taking a look at food and what we're supposed to eat. Remember, you want your diet to consist of basically around 50% fruits and vegetables, 30% of the vegetables, 20% being the fruit, 30% grains, and then 20% proteins. And you want to get on average around 3 cups of dairy every single day. So that kind of breaks things down for you that way. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to come see me. I'll be glad to answer them. But this review does a pretty good job of covering the major topics that we've discussed and activities that we've done in class. I wish you guys the best of luck.